is to have you all sit down here, but we are happy you're here. On behalf of the board of the Longmont Downtown Development Authority, the City of Longmont, the Longmont Urban Renewal Authority, Downtown Colorado, Inc., and the APA Colorado, I would like to thank all of you for attending our first Building Better Cities Dialogue. My name is Kimberly McKee. I'm the Executive Director of the Longmont Downtown Development Authority, and I'm also on the board of Downtown Colorado, Inc. And we are just so excited to have all of you to come and be a part of this discussion. I think talking about our city and having dialogues like this are so important, and we do continue to do this in the future and have other conversations about what other cities are doing, what we value as a city, all different types of things. But this discussion only works because of each one of you that are here to hear it, to have dialogue afterward outside. So we hope you can share and stay in the happy hour immediately following and have some further discussions. I'd like to thank Jody Marsh, David Starnes, and Sean Lewis, who worked very closely in planning this event with all of us. I'd also like to mention some of our advanced Longmont partners. The Longmont Economic Development Partnership, that's their new name, if you haven't heard. Visit Longmont, the Longmont Area Economic Council, the Longmont Area Chamber, Tinkermill Launch Longmont, the Longmont Community Foundation, the Longmont Area Realtors Association, the Longmont Housing Authority, St. Ray Valley School District, Farm Ridge Community College, and the Latino Chamber. I'd also like to thank Channel 8 for being here to record this talk, so others that couldn't be here tonight can hear what we were discussing, as well as the Longmont Museum for this wonderful facility and having us host this here. As you know, I do have a passion for Longmont, and I'm very proud to help strengthen and develop our downtown. We are one of the Colorado creative districts, and it is really important that we as a community continue to progress and mindfully and impactfully grow. It is an honor to have Joe Minicozzi from Urban 3 here. He is here to discuss long-term property value drivers, suburban sprawl, and the value of mixed-use urban development. I came back from our last Downtown Colorado Inc. conference, and I told everyone they had to endure Conference Kimberly, who was all excited about all the new things that she learned. And I really felt that Joe's message was amazing. I went to our wonderful board and I asked them if we could bring him here and work with the city. And so I'm very excited to introduce Joe. He can tell you a little bit more of his background and to start our dialogue today.
Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you, Kimberly. How many of you all have seen me present before? I see a few familiar faces. Okay, y'all can't shut out the answers to some of this stuff, right? My background actually starts in architecture. I went to architecture school and undergraduate at University of Miami at the time that Dwayne Plater-Zyberg, two of my professors, were toying around with this new urbanism stuff. Some of my friends actually worked on, was it Kiki Wallace's project here in town. So I've been around that stuff. I went to grad school for urban design with a concentration in real estate development, and then had a smattering of weird jobs. I worked as a zoning administrator. But what I'm going to present to you is how I look at cities through real estate development, mostly from the lens of a real estate developer in Asheville, North Carolina. During that time, for the DDA board members, I was on our downtown board for 5 years and endured some pain, trying to bring numbers to my city to get my city to understand the economic impact of what's going on in downtown. And I'm sure you all experience this, the stuff, the details that you talk about. I mean, I could have endless conversations about cigarette butts on the sidewalk, and I know that you all do that as well. But what does it mean to our city to have a downtown? What does it mean to be in a city? So one of the ways I usually start my presentation is by asking the audience, who in the audience has read your local assessment tax policies? We got one person. Are you the tax assessor? You are? Cool. We're going to get into some cool stuff then. This is the cash flow of how your city operates. I love this quote from Mark Twain. A person who won't read has no advantage over one who can't read. You know, I'm an architect. I like to look at pictures. Yet I look at our tax policies and read through them to see how they operate the city financially. The other thing I want to put up forward is a couple lessons. And one lesson is the way that I see cities as a place and time as a continuum. They start a certain way. Longmont started a certain way with a certain development pattern, and it set aside some genetic material to grow into the future. You will be growing, hopefully, into the future. Many cities do. So if you want to see the way Asheville started, we would look at the way that Asheville started back in its heyday, and then see how it's growing forward. A really simple way of looking at it is the way that we look at ourselves. So if you want to see me when I was 3 months old, that's how I started with hair. And this is my trajectory, right? I'm going to be Papa whether I like it or not. Now, you all do this, right? And more importantly, I'm looking at this guy, my dad, again, when I still had hair. But I have 2 genetic issues. I'm genetically Italian, so I like to eat a lot of bad food for me. But we also have a family genetic predisposition to heart disease. So I know that's in me. You know, I'd be foolish to gamble and eat a hamburger every single day, even though I like hamburger, I like bacon, I like pepperoni. You know, there's these things. So you all do this, right? You see what's coming your way and you plan for it. We do it better when we're in our 40s and 50s than we do when we're in our 20s. So think about that for your city. Are you planning ahead? What are you planning? Who's your model? How are you growing and what kind of patterns do you want to achieve? And I just want to put that lesson up front. The other thing I want to put up front is a simple test. I'm going to show you a children's puzzle, and I just want you all to tell me how many shapes you see in this kid's puzzle. Now, again, for those of you that have seen this, don't shout the answers out, but for everybody else, this is a really simple puzzle. I'm going to give you 5 seconds. Tell me how many shapes you see. Ready, go. Okay, how many shapes? 19. 47. Wow. We've got what was the 8 at the low and 47 at the high? Anybody want to go lower than 8? 5. Anybody want to go higher than 47? How many kids were on the school bus? What time was it on the clock? So there's a Nobel Prize winning behavioral economist. His name is Daniel Kahneman. He wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. It was on the New York Times bestseller list for about 6 months. But basically what he talks about is that we have a 2-mode way of thinking in our brains, that we have behavioral quirks in the way that we operate. We are not rational beings. There's another book by Daniel Ehrlich called Predictable Irrational that gets in the same methods. What I just did to you is played on one of your behavioral tricks, your quirks, really. I put you in fast mode. I asked you a question. You didn't see the 5 kids on the bus. You didn't see that it was 10 after 10 on the clock, because I didn't ask you that question. Think about being a hunter-gatherer out in the savannah. You're hungry. You're looking for 2 things. You're looking for that antelope, and you're looking for that tiger that could eat you. That's it. You will filter out all of the other information. What I'm about to show you going through this whole presentation, I just asked different questions. There's nothing rocket science in what we do. We're just asking different questions about cities. So let's talk about cities. That's my big question that I want to keep in your mind is, what is your city and what are you doing with it? What's your role in the city? This is Asheville. This is my town. And you can see why they call it the Smoky Mountains. Incidentally, my town's the same size as your town. We're only 90,000 people. It was kind of stunning for me to kind of drive down Main Street and see you at one building 3 stories tall. That building right there with the red top on it was built in 1927. It's 12 stories tall. So Asheville is up in the mountains, the western part of the state, Blue Ridge Parkway and Smoky Mountains, beautiful scenery. Bluegrass music, home of bluegrass music is up in that part of the world. Beer, we've got one of your breweries now. Oscar Blues moved into our town, or next town over in Brevard. We've got 20 breweries in town. We beat you guys on a brewery per capita basis. We drink more, I guess. And like any quirky little mountain town, we have men dressed as nuns on tall bikes that eat fire. It's a typical little place, right? Asheville didn't start this quirky. This is how we started. This is a shot down Main Street in the 1800s. 15 years after this picture was taken, this is what became of Asheville. It exploded in growth in the 1920s. We had the second streetcar line in the entire country. Presidents came to visit, Teddy Roosevelt here. We've had Obama 3 times in Asheville. During the 1920s, we were growing at 20% in population every single year through the decade. Massive growth. We became the second largest city in North Carolina. The only city that was bigger than Asheville was Winston-Salem by 1930. In that period, we achieved the highest debt per capita of the entire United States. We were #1 in debt. Isn't that awesome? And when the books were audited, when the Depression hit, we thought we had $5 million in the bank. It turned out we had $18,000 in the bank, a little clerical error there. Our city council was indicted, and the mayor committed suicide 3 days later. Maybe that's leadership, I don't know. But I mean, we really fell flat on our face. That's that 12-story building built in 1927, by the way. So Asheville really bombed out. Thomas Wolfe, a famous American author who wrote the book Look Homeward Angel, was a native of Asheville, and this is what he had to say about his hometown. Asheville, oh, by the way, he wrote this in a book. Asheville has squandered fabulous sums. They've flung away the earnings of a lifetime. They've mortgaged those of a generation to come. They have ruined a city. And in doing so, they've ruined themselves, their children, and their children's children. These are nice words to say about your hometown, right? Now, in the South, you kind of don't say stuff like this, but some people got mad. They asked his parents to never let him come home again because they'd kill him, and he didn't. He stayed up in New York City, but he wrote a second book called You Can't Go Home Again for obvious reasons. Seriously, that's the truth. So, in a way, Thomas nailed it. He knew that this would be a multi-generational problem. We chose to not take the New Deal program, the stimulus that happened in the 1930s from the federal government. We took that debt out. We were going to pay it back. It took us until 1976 to pay off that debt. And to show you the cultural problem that happened to our community, this kind of impact that it had, we weren't even proud enough to make it the lead story after 50 years, right? Or 40 years. So here it is. This is, get some guys to burn the last bond, get Miss Asheville to wear a tiara and hold it. Teleprompter and Billy Graham, you got to do that, that's important. But check this out. First headline, second headline. The first headline is actually about somebody dying in a prison fire in some neighboring county. I mean, it's crazy. But when we got out of that debt, when we paid it off, we started catching up to other communities. We started building highways. We cut a highway across the north side of downtown, which became the Crosstown Expressway. And the coup de grace was when we blew the mountain open. Here, we call this the Bowcatcher Cut. I love that it's on a postcard. Isn't this awesome? Come visit our cut. And I'm kind of surprised we don't have Colorado people hiking and climbing up the side of this thing. But get some folks from Ouray to come by here. But anyway, on the other side of the cut, the mall happened and our downtown died. Familiar story? We basically followed the path that all these other cities did. These are shots of downtown. That's a 1990, like a mid-90s Chevy Celebrity. Look at this wonderful fixer-upper opportunity. Wouldn't you want to come into my downtown and put a little elbow grease into this thing? And our downtown is dead. You can blow a cannon off and not hit anybody on the sidewalk. We covered everything up, just board it up and just hope that it just disappears or something. Or the other answer is aluminum, just panel it in. And like a Greek choir, anytime somebody tried to fix downtown, those children's children would rise up and they'd say, we're mountain people, we're not city people. We're not from Charleston. We're not from New York City. Get that stuff out of here. That didn't work the last time. Do y'all have people like this? They'll never work here. It's not who we are. Every community I go to has this. There was a series of people that actually did rehab and started working on things. Julian Price founded a for-profit real estate development company called Public Interest Projects. I used to work in his firm. Julian's passed away, but he used his inheritance to essentially create a real estate development company that would put 75% of the money into these sticks and bricks, making places for people to live downtown. And then we'd use 25% of his money to seed businesses, seed entrepreneurs, to start the first vegetarian restaurant right here, the Laughing Seed, or Salsa Zambras, a nightclub. This is the Orange Peel. So it's about getting people living downtown, but also having things for them to do. And it's a revolving fund that has to cash flow. So this is one of our buildings, before and after. These are 400 to 600 unit or square foot unit apartments. So who in this room would live in a 400 to 600 square foot unit apartment? I've got about 5%, 10% of the audience. Let me change the question. Who in this room has lived in a 400 to 600 square foot unit? That was our marketing survey. So rather than being afraid of, oh my God, I'd never live in a 400 to 600 square foot unit apartment, we basically left that up to the community, that surely there are 26 people that are new to town, recently divorced, recently graduated, whatever, just want to downsize, and they wouldn't mind being above a bookstore on Main Street. This has been 99% leased up ever since. The banks told us it would fail, by the way. So the other thing about Julian is he was an advocate. He was constantly educating. We're dealing with this community education about what cities are. He had his own newspaper in which he used to publish things about cities and how they operate. And I love this quote. This is from something about dealing with billboards and community aesthetics, but it's a quote from Arthur Frommer that he pulled. Among cities with no particular recreation appeal, those that have preserved their past continue to enjoy tourism. Those that haven't receive almost no tourism at all. Tourism simply doesn't go to a city that's lost its soul. In a way, you can hear Thomas Wolfe coming back. I mean, by the way, that's the state of the building at the time. They just bricked it in. And 15 years later, after Julian published this in 1993, Frommer's magazine would list our city as the number 5 place in the country to visit. Just last year, we got listed number 1. We have 70 restaurants downtown. This is housing, office, and restaurants. And again, that's about fixing your city. It's about thinking in an urban form the way that you see other communities going. So we're all looking at this. I'm on the Downtown Association board, and one of the things that was kind of striking to me is anybody paying attention to the economics of this? Is anybody running the numbers on what's going on with this real estate development portfolio called Downtown? We have a $15 million portfolio inside a how much is our value of our downtown, right? It's just a finite area. So our downtown was worth $100 million back in the 90s when we started this process. And these first 2 steps were the value of downtown just by fixing what was already there. We didn't get a new building until about 2008 in our downtown. And this wasn't just our effort. There's lots of people working on the downtown rehabbing these buildings. Now, just to show you the children's children, these are some of the campaign ads from the 90s. I love this. This is Chris Peterson. Chris is a hoot. I love this, like, taxpayer shackled to a parking garage and a streetscape project. So $26 million. Anybody have $26 million in your pocket? No. I mean, it's a lot of money, right? So I agree with Chris. That's a lot of money to spend. Downtown development for bureaucrats instead of water and sewer for our streets and citizens, right? I mean, Chris is playing upon emotion with this. Well, let's get past emotion. Let's get past what Chris believes. That's an investment, so let's do some math here. If y'all invest $26 million into a $100 million asset, and that $100 million asset grows to $500 million, is investing 26 and getting a $400 million return, is that a good return on investment? Yes. Okay. Why do we listen to Chris? You know, why do we deal with these, what we think's going on, and why don't we just look to see what's happening? So the thing that kind of got me is, why are we not talking about the city for what it is? If I'm own real estate, I'm an investor in the city of Asheville, right? So my city is worth something, the same way that my business is worth something. So if you just read Oxford American Dictionary, the word incorporate, it means to constitute a company, a city, or other organization of legal corporation. There's absolutely no difference between our real estate development corporation and our city or our county, other than the fact that those board of directors are elected. Did y'all get that? So for the elected officials in the audience, you are essentially the board of directors of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Are there any elected officials in the audience? Okay, what's your city worth? So my city is a fine... What's that?
It's pricey.
Well, no, it's not. There's a price you could put on it. My city is a finite boundary of land. We can't annex. Our state doesn't allow us to annex. So those acres are all that we have, right? The same way that the real estate that my company owns is all that it has. So it has to cash flow. We have to pay for those services that go into the crop to farm this. My city's worth $12.8 billion. It's 4 times the Donald in value. If my city were on the Fortune 500, it'd be in the top 20. Did y'all get that? Your city's probably about the same value as mine. You're probably somewhere around 13 billion. That's just your assessed value. So if we look at these crops, if we look at these buildings that are built in this farm that are growing wealth, that are paying for things, and you all are providing, particularly for the elected officials and the government officials, you're providing a service at my real estate to activate it. You're putting all this infrastructure at my front door. Am I paying you back? So this is one of our buildings here. This is what Chris complained about right here. This is the streetscape project that really irritated Chris, because we got a garbage can, a bike rack, 2 benches, and a street tree in front of our property. So thank you, city. Thank you for investing $20,000 in front of our door. Even though the entire world can walk on it, it's ours. We should be paying for it. We took this building from $300,000 of value to $11 million of value. That represents a 3,500% increase in taxes paid on that property, or my community has increased value of 3,500%. Y'all get 3,500% more taxes out of us. So go out and buy 3,500% more garbage cans. We don't care. Anybody in this room have a 401k plan that grows by 3,500%, or some CD or bond or something? I mean, that's a heck of a return, right? So people say to me, like, well, Joe, that's not fair. We've got this Walmart over here. That Walmart's valued about $20 million. It's quite impressive. This Walmart pays $221,000 in property taxes. Anybody pay $221,000 in property taxes? This is my house. These are my dogs. My dogs think they're lions. We do this to we do that to freak out our neighbors. It's a whole lot of fun. But they'll stay there forever too. We pay $2,000 in taxes. We're on a 1/10 of an acre. So if you had a 1-acre cookie cutter that fell from space and landed in my neighborhood, it grabbed 10 houses, right? We're all paying about $2,000 or about $20,000 an acre in taxes. You follow me? If you take that 1-acre cookie cutter, fly it in space and drop it on the Walmart, this is what they pay per acre. So if you divide its tax bill by the amount of corporation it consumed, got to make things apples to apples, right? This is the tax bill. This is the way we should be looking at it. Now, if you had an acre of our building downtown, incidentally, thank you all. This is an old JCPenney's building right here. So this is residential, office, and retail. This is producing about $634,000 an acre in taxes. Did y'all follow that? Built in 1924. So taller than anything in your community. But you know, if you had an acre of land to grow something in Colorado, let me make it easy for you. What are you going to grow? So you're probably like, Joe, that's not fair. We don't do that in our community for property taxes. We do it for retail taxes. So let's go ahead and remove me because I don't sell anything. And let's run the retail taxes. And again, we'll focus on the big number, but the reality of it is my city gets a portion of that, or about $47,000, or a total tax take, retail plus property tax per acre. Boom, that's just our property taxes. Let's be fair, what about our retail taxes? We've got retail on the ground floor and in the basement. This is what you get. Jobs. The reason why we built cities for tens of thousands of years is because they make economic sense. We just have to learn from the past. So we even have residential per acre versus their 0. Could you all imagine if I showed up in your town and proposed a 90-unit an acre building? You guys would run me out of here faster than God knows what, right? So again, it's how we talk about this data. We need to be literate about what's going on and what we're really trying to produce, right? So that's just the city side. As you know, our corporation, I think you all are members of a county, right? So you're all paying county taxes. So this is the average. My county has a real problem with us, by the way. Our state legislator called us a cesspool of sin. And you know, I was on the downtown board, and we're all having this board meeting. And we're like, God, why did he say that? And so what do? It's the South, so we want to be polite, so we send a reporter off. Maybe Senator Forrester didn't really mean it. And the second article came out, and he said, well, I don't mean the good people of Buncombe County. It's just that city. Actually, the downtown part, that's where the freaks and weirdos are. That's a cesspool. So we did the only thing we could. We threw a cesspool party. We drank some beer and wear water wings and shorts and danced around. Anyway, this is, we made this chart to show this is the average city resident and what they pay in county taxes out to the county, and somebody in the unincorporated county and what they pay. So rather than hate on us, how about sending us a thank you card for all the wealth we're giving you? This is the mall. Now you see why an elected official would choose commercial over residential. Commercial pays handsomely, $8,000 an acre in county taxes. Well, let's not stop there. Let's bring downtown into it. So here's the mall. Here's our building at $250,000 an acre in county taxes. So what we've learned in this is what's good for Main Street is great for the city, but it's unbelievable for the county. There are absolutely no children in that building going to school. So we're just basically shoveling a lot of money out to the county, but when's the county come in and done a streetscape project in my downtown? When have they helped us with a dog park or something? So part of what we do in Asheville is we open up that conversation to say, look, we're going to help you out, county. We want to have you be a cooperative partner in this. How can we work together to best leverage these investments? So I want you to know this isn't complex math that I'm doing here. It's fifth grade division. I'm just dividing value propositions into the land. I'm just using land as the least common denominator because that's the only thing you can control. Do y'all follow that? So we do this when we measure productivity. When we measure these cars, we don't measure them on a miles per tank basis, do we? If we did, we'd all be driving Ford F-150s at 650 miles per tank. Instead, you realize you're like, hey, Joe, that's stupid. All tanks are different sizes. It's the gasoline that's important. It's the gallon that drives the car, so we say miles per gallon, the numbers change. I didn't change the cars, and we should all be driving BMW Asettas at 70 miles per gallon. Do y'all follow that? If we're doing this for a $2 commodity at this point, shouldn't we be doing this for a $40,000 commodity? You can't make another Longmont. So we've done this all across the country, and just taking the data of everybody's counties and mashing them up, this is what we see. For every dollar of county single-family tax somebody out in county single-family pays to the county per acre, a city resident's coughing up about $6 to the county, the Walmart's about 7, the mall's about 9. As soon as you get to a 2-story building on Main Street, and this could be Driggs, Idaho, or downtown Durham, North Carolina, it really doesn't matter. As soon as you get to a 2-story building, it shoots up. And this is a 3-story building and a 6-story building. And it's not a proportional jump from this, it's an exponential jump. It's crazy. That urban environment begets more wealth in a smaller area. So, to quote Chief Justice Brandeis, these are just the relentless rules of humble arithmetic. If you just do the math on this stuff, you'll see a whole different reality of your community. So we kind of specialize in moving the city out of the way, and we use GIS technology to do conventional things. So there's streets and infrastructure, the buildings are built on that. You all already do this stuff. And we also can map the ologies. We can map hydrology, geology, all that stuff is in computer world that you can pull out in GIS. What we like to do is split the gap between nature and the man-made and map your productivity. I want you to see what's going on with your economics. So here's Asheville. This is my county. This is the whole county. We have non-taxable, so this is a tax value key. Non-taxable is in gray. So this is a big federal park. It's paying no taxes. This is the Blue Ridge Parkway cutting through Asheville. So we zero it out. We've got low value in green, hot is high value. So this is a super, super valuable parcel right here. This is $100 million of value. It's the Biltmore Estate, America's largest house, $100 million. It's 8,000 acres. Anybody in this room have 8,000 acres? So of course it's going to be valuable. This is the biggest gas tank in the county. It's not fair to look at it that way. Yet when Mr. Cecil walks into the room, we all bow down to Mr. Cecil because he's really rich. Let's put it aside and talk about productivity. Rather than total value or miles per tank, let's go value per acre, and the map changes. I'll just show it to you in 3D. Anybody want to guess where downtown Asheville might be? Boom. Right? And what's cool about this is you can see other municipalities. Here's the Biltmore Estate, by the way, it just flattens out. That's Black Mountain. That's a town of, I want to say 6,000 people. And like if this is Mama Bear, this is Baby Bear with its Main Street right there. So we allow the city to just reveal itself economically, and then we can start making an honest intellectual conversation about the building types. And last year we went to Durango for the DCI presentation, and the community there funded a study as part of the conversation. So this is Durango. Here's La Plata County is a total value map, so you see the ski villages popping up is high value, but they're massive tracts of land. This is value per acre, and here's La Plata County in 3D. So you can see Main Street popping up right there like a fin. And zooming into the city, this is total value, value per acre, and again you see Main Street popping up. It's only 1 block long, or 1 block wide, about 8 blocks long, and that's the impact of downtown. Is this too nerdy for you guys? Are we all expecting this? Is this cool? Just let me know, because it gets nerdier. So in the county, they've got 60% of the land's non-taxable. It's a lot of state and federal parks. So this is where you get your cash flow to run your community. When you get into the city, they have a very aggressive open space program. They're building miles and miles of greenways and buying up land and flipping it into the greenway in the park system, which is cool. That's their choice. But they really should start to pay careful attention to this. Typically of a city, we usually find 30 to 40% non-taxable for a city scale. When you get into the central business district, this is about average, 30% non-taxable. So these are your city buildings, your churches, parks, whatever you have downtown. From an economic standpoint, Durango takes up 1% of the entire county as a footprint, yet it's producing 35% of the county's property taxes. So for those of you that have a business, imagine one server in your restaurant serving 35% of the restaurant's patrons. How would you treat that server? Would you smack them upside the head once a year? No. You'd be very thankful for that kind of productivity. When you look at the sales tax creation of that 1%, it's producing 76% of the sales tax of the entire county. That's the power of Durango and La Plata County. When you get into the downtown, inside the city, downtown takes up about 1% of the city, yet produces 11% of the property tax and 37% of the city's retail taxes. And again, this is the data that's hiding in plain sight. You just have to show it. That's a very big productivity return. You get it? Now, let's step back out again. Let's see what downtown does in the county. Downtown takes up 0.01% of the entire county land area, yet produces 28% of the county's retail taxes and 4% of the county's property taxes. So downtown is just a little tiny little piece of dirt inside the county, is very, very productive. Zooming through some buildings, just pulling out some. This is the average county single family and what they produce in county value per acre, the mall, the Home Depot. The average city single family resident is more productive than the mall and the Home Depot. Here's the Walmart. This is the mall near downtown. Multifamily, here's the average of downtown. This is a one-story coffee shop on Main Street. And then this is kind of cool. That's an infill building, a little 4-story infill building here, $65,000 an acre of productivity. And then this was kind of cool. This apparently was a very controversial building that they added housing on top of a 1-story retail, and everybody flipped out because it didn't have enough parking. And I was like, well, find another way to solve that. That's very, very valuable land. If we were to go off and make surface parking lots, you essentially don't have any value there, because the assessor is going to go out there and say, it's asphalt, right? There's no improvement on the land. This is an improvement which produces value. That's how you get your money. So David Starnes gave me some numbers from your community. This is the taxes per acre coming out of Creekside Business Park, Longmont Business Park, your Walmart, your Target. This is the property taxes, sorry. Harvest Junction, and then this is the projects that I think they're proposed to come in, and the expected revenue producing out of those. So this is mixed use versus single use office and retail. So basically in Durango, if you had 0.6 acres of that infill building, 0.6 acres of that would equal the 10-acre Home Depot site. 0.3 acres of that guy would equal the 13-acre Walmart. 0.4 acres of this would equal the Walmart. Did y'all get this? Now, I'm an architect. I have a hard time looking past the old buildings and seeing the lesson in them. These are buildings built by your great-grandparents, basically, that are left for you in your community. And when you look at this building here, the Strater Hotel, 1.5 acres of that building would equal the 19-acre mall site. Just to show you what a nerd I am, I actually went to the International Association of Assessing Officers conference and presented there. But I sat through the head of Walmart's real estate presentation. And he was basically showing slides of how cheap his buildings were. Slide after slide, how cheap the buildings were. And the assessors are agnostic. They're like, okay, if you're building junk, it's junk. Thanks for giving us the numbers. And they're writing them all down. I'm in the back of the room having a heart attack because I'm thinking, this is brilliant. He's got hundreds and thousands of assessors in one room, and in one meeting, he's getting all of his taxes dropped. Now, the citizen in me, my heart is melting because he's basically yelling into the room, I am going to pay the lowest taxes possible. People ask me all the time, they're like, Joe, do you got a problem with Walmart? Like, no, you're missing the point. I don't hate the player, I hate the game. The game is, and I went up and asked him during Q&A, I went to the microphone and I asked him, I said, Mr. Terrell, what's the useful life of one of your Walmarts? He said, 15 years. We'll be out of that building in 15 years, maybe 20. But we are designing that on a depreciable basis to sink. That's it, folks. Your property tax system works that simply. The cheaper and junkier the building I make, the lower the taxes. The more land I consume, the lower the value. That's it. So that's why these numbers look this way. That building, however, was not designed to fall apart in 15 years. So here you see a high potency of value, $12 million an acre versus $500,000. And that building has been producing a statically high value. Even when it's cratered and was probably vacant, it still had value, much more so than this thing. And it's had it for 100 years. This building here, the spa, that little guy, $16.8 million, and just a two-story building. 0.5 acres of that guy would equal this. Can you not find half an acre to do more of that? So, okay, that's property taxes. That's mostly for the county. Now we're getting into the city. Your cities run mostly off retail taxes. But to be fair, when you put your city and your county together, in Colorado, the majority of your cities run off property taxes in red. This is retail in green. And then this is usually state or federal transfer. Your cities consume most of that retail. So this is the property tax model. We had to change the model boundaries because of how your state allows us to look at retail. We can't look at individual businesses. So we made a downtown district. This is the South Durango district with the mall, the Walmart, and the Home Depot. But there's property tax production. Here's the retail tax production. So downtown's still killing it versus the almost monolithically commercial environment down here. Just let the data speak for it. Don't take your biases or your anecdotal, I was at the Walmart and it was packed. Well, yeah, it was Saturday. Everybody was there on Saturday. Go there on a Tuesday afternoon. You know, the data is there. It'll show it to you. This is total productivity when you add retail plus property taxes, jobs. This has got the hospital down here, so it pumps this up. So what we find in all of our data is that if you do the math, you see these downtowns popping up all over the place. So just to recap, here's downtown Durango, here's South Durango. South Durango produces more retail taxes than downtown in aggregate. The county taxes in aggregate are bigger, but when you actually compare them side by side, this is the boundary size. So downtown is what, 1/3 the size, maybe smaller than 1/3, and it's almost keeping up. So the total tax productivity is off by 1 million. So we said to them, we said, look, just grow your downtown by 8 acres. Do 8 acres more of downtown. You'll catch up in retail and everything else to South Durango. Now, the other thing that we were seeing, is this, I'm going to keep on asking you, is this getting too nerdy? Are you following me on all this stuff? We're now getting into area charts, which are, we love kind of nerdy graphics. But so this is the retail taxes over time from 2004 to 2013. Here's the recession. You see this saddle. And then we basically, just like a layer cake, layered all the districts on top of each other. So we've got downtown, here's South Durango down here. And you see South Durango growing. It grows quite well from here to here. Well, when you look at downtown, downtown started here at about 86% of South Durango. Through the recession, downtown grew to about 91%. So downtown started catching up with the South Durango area. What's crazy is, we asked the question, we're like, well, what did downtown do to catch up? Downtown added 17,000 square feet of new retail. South Durango was adding 300,000. So even though South Durango was growing wildfire with new buildings, downtown was still catching up. So you can see the potency of how downtown was punching well above its weight. Did y'all follow that? So you can add more of this stuff, it's just not as potent. So we were allowed to dig a little deeper in Durango because a couple of businesses on Main Street decided to share and open their books. And I really have to give Tim and Peter, Tim Wheeler and Peter, I think his last name is Gretsch. Tim owns the coffee shop, Peter owns the bookshop, and we took their books and kind of combined them so you couldn't see who was selling what, but they're both one-story retailers. This is a one-story retailer. Land consumed for these guys, land consumed for that. Here's the property taxes per acre paid by both of them. Here's the retail taxes produced by both of them. So who would have thought a coffee shop and a bookstore were killing it in retail taxes like that? Jobs per acre. So let me ask you a question. Who sponsors a Little League team? Who hires a local attorney to do their work? Who hires a local advertising firm to advertise? And again, this is all things that they felt very, very passionately about, and they wanted to open their books to show it. So I have to thank them for that. So okay, Joe, what do you do with this stuff? Now that we know this information, how do we display it? What do we work with it? In Chattanooga, we did a study. This is their downtown. They have this area across the river. This is like Chattanooga's version of Brooklyn. There's 25-year-old men with beards down to their knees that bicycle across this bridge. So this is the hipster zone. This is the downtown. And in the hipster zone, they want to build this grocery store. This developer came in from Atlanta, and the mayor's like, we need to get rid of all of our urban design guidelines because we've got these 40 jobs that are coming in, and this guy wants to build a building. So let's just do the conventional suburban, because the Atlanta developer is like, this is all I know how to do. This is all I can do. I don't need to follow your rules. Incidentally, do you all see the retaining wall in this drawing? I used to be on a planning board for 3 years, and I'd sit next to my peers on the planning board, and these drawings would come by, and I'm like, look at that retaining wall. And other people on the planning commission were just like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, it's clearly written right there in 5-point font, and there's the dashed line. That's a retaining wall. We'll get back to that in a second. So here's the site. In the neighborhood, they already have mixed-use buildings. We're not grabbing something from downtown Boulder or something, or downtown Boston. This is the urban grocer that the local guy did. It's called a Green Life. And then here's townhouses. So you have the ingredients of urbanism already happening in the neighborhood. It's already proven in the marketplace. You also have conventional Publix grocery stores. Publix is a Southeast regional chain. And here's what some local folks have done. This is office above retail, residential above retail. So they've proven that it works. Here's the local grocer, Green Life. So you've got the grocery store. And this is called a liner building, where you kind of glue it on to the front of the grocery store. So these are like yoga studios and, I don't know, dog boutiques or whatever. Publix has done some crazy stuff. This is a Publix grocery store in Miami Beach, where they put the parking on the roof of the grocery store. And it looks like a UFO hit this, but it's a conveyor belt to get you up to your parking with your grocery cart. 1998, they did this. This is a small footprint Publix. It's called a two-sider. So you've got the conventional surface parking lot, and then on the back side, they make a pedestrian front. So you've got two doors. So they know how to do that too. This is the hybrid model. So here's your site, 34-foot of grade change. Here's the plan. Here's what it really is. So we made a really simple SketchUp model. This is free software that you can get online. And we just want to drive the point home that all these houses now get to look at a tarmac of a roof. And here's your quarter-mile long future graffiti wall right here. But we're also running the taxes. Now, don't bother paying attention to that. I'll come back to that. So what if you just did Urban Design 101? What if you just went down the street and got the local guy to do the townhouses on the front side, so you have housing facing housing, and you put a couple corner buildings down that are mixed use, call it a day, keep your big parking lot. This is what you get. Do a better site design, do what the local guy did, move the store up against the street, put a partial liner building, ring the site in a mix of uses, keep your parking in the center, so you have a good pedestrian street through here. This is where the bus line is. This is what you get. Go crazy, do Miami Beach. You've got 34-foot of grade change, just drive right up on the roof, put a parking deck up there, densify the heck out of this, go crazy. What I'm advocating here is that you all do the same for your corporation. And in Chattanooga's case, we just said to them, we said, you should understand this. If I'm asking to get rid of policies, there's a cost to that you're going to bear. This is the cost difference. So if we just take two of those, this is the difference. This is what you're getting visually different. This is what you're getting financially different. Now, the reality of this, just to be honest and to be true, you should be doing a net present value of this over time. When I make this decision to build this, I am leaving it with you for 20 years. This site will not change for 20 years at least. So when you look at these numbers, this is actually wrong. You really should be doing the net value of this compressed to today over 20 years, which is this. We're talking millions of dollars difference. So you could gain $600,000, or you could gain millions of dollars in new revenue. Heck, y'all could just reach in your pocket, throw $2 million into the deal to tell a developer to do this. You'd still be ahead of the game by $2.2 million. Do y'all follow that? So what's phenomenal is that we look at our landscape and we just assume that it's a free market that's happening. But what's happening is I'm getting your infrastructure, not paying you for it. So when this stuff happens, you're essentially taking a very thin level of revenue over time. So your budget today is actually affected by things that happened 20 and 30 years ago. So the reason why we don't have money for the Greenway or the art teacher or the dancing traffic cop, y'all have a dancing traffic cop here? The reason why you don't have this money is because it's tied up. So let's see, how we doing? How we doing on time? Are we all right? Keep going? You good? So we studied transit lines in Austin and Charlotte. This is Charlotte's transit line. This is Austin's. Austin did 3 times the infrastructure, so they cut corners on the service. So they created an apples to oranges train system. The key thing was this. Charlotte, because they had less infrastructure, they actually put more money into their service hours. So they run between 5 and 1. The last train leaves downtown Austin at 7 p.m. So imagine how your real estate would be affected if the last train left Denver at 7 p.m. I wouldn't move out here because I don't want to be stuck in downtown, right? So that was happening in the real estate. We grabbed downtown Austin, then we like a cookie cutter, went out the TODs and grabbed their values and did the same for Charlotte and saw a value difference. The average value of the train station areas outside of downtown was 1.3 million, double the value of what was going on in Austin. Yet when you looked at Austin, their value of their downtown was double the value of Charlotte. Actually, across every category, Austin was killing Charlotte, except for the TODs, which are these dots on this line. So this is Austin's line in blue, and this is Charlotte's line. So we basically told them, I said, just change the program of the train. You'll get that investment back in developers investing in those train stations. At the very least, you're going to catch up to Charlotte. Did y'all follow that? So you should be thinking about how to capture that value and how to get the value out of the buildings out of that. Just to go through one last case study. This is a different Lafayette. This is Lafayette, Louisiana. Lafayette, Louisiana is going broke. Their mayor hired us to run the numbers to explain how they're going bankrupt. And it was really funny. We're just like, y'all figured this out 20 years ago. You don't need us. In 1994, the parish government was collapsing. The parish is the county. So imagine Boulder County going broke. Like, what would you all do? Your county residents, right? But the county had a real hard time like making a decision. So the first year, the finance officer for the county, this is the cover, I'm seriously not making this up. The finance officer on the cover of the document made this. So that's the Lafayette Parish government right there, about to get hit by a wave and the shark's gonna eat it. I love Louisiana people, they got a sense of humor. So what do you think the commission did? Nothing. They just kicked that can down the road, right? We don't want to make the tough decision. So the next year, the finance officer, undeterred, she made this one. Did I tell you how screwed we are? And then the third year, everybody finally realized you can't avoid this impending disaster, so to save the county, they did a joint city-county government. So it's kind of like watching the Titanic sink, and to save the Titanic, you just hook it onto the last escape boat. So it only took 20 years to drag that boat down. And we said to them, like, look, if you're going to cash flow a community, do it start with the way developers do it. If I build this godforsaken place in Arizona somewhere, but if I build this, I've got soft costs, I've got hard costs. I put my profit on it divided by the rooftops. That's how I do real estate development, right? When you all get this into your tax system, do you do the same thing? Do you run the service costs, the hard costs, all the costs of all the road network and their piece of it, and do you bill them for all that infrastructure? No. You may do an impact fee, but most of it's coming out of taxes. And if you're taxed on value, this is never going to cover the cost of that stuff because no one ever runs the numbers. So I'm not the first guy to come onto this idea. The concept actually starts with the Nixon administration. In 1973, they published this document, The Cost of Sprawl. So in the first gas crisis, we're being told that it's all local land use decisions that are driving our economics. The feds didn't want to step in and control us. So we did the revenue model. Here you see downtown. This is their version. This is like their new urbanism project here. But downtown's killing it. And we looked at things like their pavement. They own a lot of roads. Come on. So this is their road system. If you push all of their roads together, it makes a parking lot 6.5 square miles square. And we just went ahead and floated it over New Orleans to show them it's like 12 times the size of the French Quarter. And we said every 50 years, you have to rebuild all of that. As a developer, I build it, I hand it to you, I call it free infrastructure. I'm like, here's my development, take my streets. And everybody's like, wow, great, we got free infrastructure. You didn't get free infrastructure. You've got a liability that you need to replace in the future. So again, you're going to be experiencing this with some of the roads that you built 40 and 50 years ago. We've got these things. 15% of their road surface are these things. We call them danglers, but dead ends. So they're publicly funded and publicly maintained driveways. Like the community can't use these as part of the network. They're a dead end. I mean, this guy even treats it like a driveway, right? He sticks his trailer there. So of the city, this is the old city. This yellow stuff is the county. This would be the equivalent of Longmont, and then here's Boulder or something. Like these other cities just chose to not be part of this experiment. But when you look at the surface area of roads, 2/3 of the roads are in the city. It's a much finer grained network. When you look at the budget, this is how it's financed. So we made the obvious recommendation of saying that these two pie charts should match because they're not paying their fair share of the roads that they have out here. Do y'all follow that? The other thing that we did is we cash flowed the roads. We basically took all the roads and said, let's say that you put into a savings account the replacement of the road in front of your property, just a little bit. It's like your retirement account. So in 1960, that road gets built, and then you start saving money. But every time a new road gets built, you start a new savings fund, and you just grow that wealth. So then you start replacing that road from 1960 in 2010. This is what the financial model of the city looks like. And if you built no more roads from here into the future, your city's going to go bankrupt in 2060. Did y'all follow me on that? You guys got really quiet. Did I take a too far a turn into nerdy stuff on this? This really pissed off one of the commissioners, who the guy's my age, and he was a fiscal conservative, and we were kind of blown away that he'd get mad at us for running numbers on the system. And he totally changed his tune during the election. This is his campaign ad that he sent to the newspaper about his platform. I love this. It's not about where you live, it's about what you believe. I believe I'm Brad Pitt. Sooner or later, I got to walk by a mirror, right? So the people in Louisiana are funny. The public works director responded to this by saying this: there's no such thing as an infrastructure fairy. And we photoshopped Kevin in. He's a riot. So here's the deal. In blue is their revenue for their streets. In red is their liability. Well, let me make it simpler for you. In blue is their revenue, and in red is their liability. Now hold on. Half of that blue is already committed to debt service on this red thing. Let me ask you a really simple math question. Is blue as big as the red? I don't care what you believe. So this is a side view of their model. In their model, we ran all of their taxes. We also sent everybody a bill for their infrastructure. So here's what they pay in taxes. Here's what they cost. We net one against the other, what's in the red and what's in the black. Any business would do this. And this is the entire county is a revenue model. And they call them the parishes down there. And I said, looks like your parish is bleeding. And we just took the whole model, and if you just drop it on the floor so everything pops up vertically, this is what it looks like. So we have areas, and we said to them, just do more of this green stuff before you take on more of this red stuff. And part of this red stuff, this shows you the heights of subsidy that are in those properties. So when the market makes that choice, who wouldn't take this financial deal? If I could get $6 million of infrastructure for $6, do you think I'd do that? Hell yeah. So when you look at your marketplace, realize what's being incented. One of the biggest things that we saw driving it in Louisiana was their stormwater system. This little guy right down here, that little section of town is super, super expensive, hence the subsidy. Then we looked at how the MPO was driving future land use decisions, and they have this model. So they're projecting all the future growth to come out in this blue area in areas that they already can't afford. So they're going through their TIP schedule, which is their transportation improvement schedule at a metropolitan level, and investing in roads that are going to drive the city and the county broke. And I'm like, just stop that. So let's kind of recap on this. In 1950, they had 34,000 people. They had 5 feet of pipe per person and about 2.4 fire hydrants per 1,000 people. As they grew, they got rich. They got rich during the 60s, and they invested in their infrastructure. So they grew their population by 350%, yet they grew their infrastructure liability up to 50 feet of pipe per person and 51 fire hydrants. So 350% population growth, 1,000% infrastructure, and 2,000% fire hydrants. And now they have to pay for all this stuff. So did they get richer? Yes. Their average household value or income adjusted for today was about $28,000 in 1950. Today it's up to about $45,000. They've grown their wealth, but only by 200%. So imagine I got a raise for $1,000 a year and I convinced my wife into doing a 15,000 square foot addition on my house. It doesn't pencil out. So they have a really serious problem, and they just have to put their heads together and solve it. The average house is worth $150,000. The average property tax is $1,500. Of that, what actually matriculates to the roads is about $150. You have to pay for police, fire, the finance department, the accountants, right? Now, if you look at the savings account, what the average house should be setting aside for their roads, this is what it is. Do y'all see a problem yet? That's just the stuff on top of the surface. There's stuff under the roads that you have to set aside as well. That's another $4,000. So the average house is upside down $7,000. So they've got the system. They bought too much. Now they have to pay for it. That's their bankruptcy writ simple. So it's just kind of closed now. There are behavioral economics driving all of this stuff. We need to be aware of it. I started this lecture talking about behavior and using a behavioral quirk. We have to get past what we think is going on with the city and look at the data to see what's really actually happening. This is one of my favorites. This is just from up the road in Cheyenne. I was presenting this to the audience in Cheyenne. You've got value in real estate. You've got the value of the dirt and the value of the improvement on the dirt. So we'll go into the computer and just turn the improvement value off. Just look at the dirt value, right? Y'all go look at your property tax bills and you'll see improvement value and land value. So this is a land value per acre. So we've got low to high, and you expect the world to look like this, right? Everybody in the neighborhood is the same value per acre of dirt. So you and all your neighbors across the street are $15,000 an acre. Y'all follow me? That's how you expect the world to operate. Now, one of the things you immediately see is, well, this dude's getting screwed right here. You see things, anomalies like that. This is what was impressive to me. This is $15,000 an acre. Crossing the street is $35,000 an acre. Just by crossing the street, the land doubles. Does anybody know why that does that? Assessor?
No, assessor.
Oh, he knows? Okay. Does anybody know why this does it? The assessor was sitting in the front row, and she immediately raised her hand. And she's like, no, Joe, you don't understand. I said, try me. What am I missing? And she goes, well, the more land you have, the lower the value. The mayor just about spat his coffee out of his nose. He was laughing so hard. I was like, hold on a second. I've got 3/4 of a mile of street here, 3/4 of a mile of street, another half mile and half mile. I've got 3 miles of street. This person's got 200 feet. She goes, yeah, we don't count infrastructure. It's like, okay, I've got a bigger site. I'm sure the planning director will agree that I can put more stuff here. If I put more stuff here, there's going to be more commerce. More commerce means more car accidents, more fire calls. She said, yeah, we don't count that. The more land you have, the lower the value. Think about any commodity. And if you had a limited commodity, which you all have, you only have so much land, why would more of it be valued less? They treat it like buying in bulk. So I asked her, I said, where'd you get this? She's like, it's a standard we have. So, we see this in Durango. Look at these properties side by side. Boom, boom. So I asked the assessors at the assessors conference, I'm like, where'd you get this standard from? Did Moses deliver it to you? It was funny. They all laughed. They thought this was hilarious. And I said, no, seriously, I want to know, where did you get this standard? And they're like, we don't know. The Assessors magazine is called Fair and Equitable, and they take this very seriously. And so I asked them, I said, how is this fair or equitable? And they're like, it's not. I was like, okay, how do you change it? And they're like, you should talk to Larry. Like, Larry who? They're like, Larry Clark. So I find this guy, Larry Clark, in the hallway. I show him this. Larry thought this was hilarious. He's like, yeah, that's wrong. We should change it. It's going to take a while, Joe, is what he said. Let that wash over you for a second. As we practice real estate, as we understand our city, understand there are these standards built into the system. No one knows where they came from, but they're affecting you financially. These aren't invisible market forces making me choose to do what I'm doing. If I'm a smart developer like Walmart, they're going to figure out the best thing for them. And it's not to say don't have a Walmart, just make sure that you're getting your end of the bargain on it for your investment in it. So taxes change things and make people behave differently. This is Corbellment in Normandy. You were taxed on your building footprint, so people started projecting out over the street. They threw out the tax system. In England, you were taxed on the number of windows you had because glass was expensive. The more windows, the more shillings. People started boarding up their windows. They changed the tax system. In France, we went to your restaurant. That was awesome today. In France, everything below your roof line was considered your building. Everything above your roof line wasn't. So people came up with this creative way of stealing Francois Mansart's roof and sticking stories up there. When the tax assessor came out, they're like, no, 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 this is clearly the roof right here, right? It wasn't a design guideline that made Paris. So there's policies, and they can hurt you. Just put the gun down. So Asheville, when you started this, I had told you Asheville's worth $12.8 billion. It's worth more than all of your professional sports teams combined. The city of Durango is $3.4 billion. It's worth more than all these professional sports teams, or about 3.1 Broncos. Yeah. And I can tell you that the owner of the Broncos, Mr. Dennis, knows Peyton Manning's towel bill. I can tell you the cups in my nightclub cost 5 cents a pop. If you don't understand what your streets cost, what your sewers cost, what all of that stuff costs, and you're not putting it in the financial model, you're not doing business. This isn't to say cities have to run with it like a business. They have to operate with business principles. You are operating as a social corporation. There will be subsidies built into the system that you're going to need. So just do the math, measure things, measure what you can, and make it part of your system. And I'll just leave it at that. Thank you. Questions? Yeah, if anybody has any questions, or if anybody wants to leave, that's cool too. Questions, anyone?
I love this. And how do you, so I couldn't track you, I just got the impact of what you just delivered. How do you explain to someone who is a low-income family here how that kind of prosperity will translate to them? So that the knee-jerk reaction isn't, oh my God, we're going to become a boulder, or we're going to push out the artists and the low-income folks. How do you translate that in a sentence or a paragraph?
Part of, there's a bunch of different ways to handle that. One of the things that we experienced in Asheville, and one of the things I did early on, is we did an assessment. I guess the simplest way, and I don't mean this as an attack or anything, but you're jumping to a conclusion that poor means subsidized or somehow not paying its fair share. What we found in most of our studies, some of the stuff that pops up green, particularly in Lafayette, are actually some of the poorest neighborhoods I've ever seen. That they're high concentrations of poverty, but they're also a lot of people in a little bit of space. And that's the key indicator of profitability, that you can serve a lot of people with less infrastructure. It's that per foot. Once you start stretching people out, if you're poor or way out at the edge of town, yeah, that's expensive. And you're already subsidizing that expense. It might actually be better to give them a better option closer to work. Otherwise they're shouldering the burden with car ownership and other means that's not being caught in the model. Does that make sense? So I would just maybe recommend do the math, but also bring that into the next level of conversation. But I've found that it's not black and white on this, that we see some poor neighborhoods that are incredibly productive, and we see some poor neighborhoods that aren't. It's just a matter of location and infrastructure. It's not monolithic, if that makes sense.
How does your jobs housing ratio figure into a lot of what we were talking about? Namely, if you don't have jobs for people, or people can't live and work in their community, and you're essentially exporting everybody who lives in your town somewhere else where they work, how does that figure back into the economic development of your downtown and thus your neighborhoods and so forth?
Which town are you talking about?
Well, I'm just thinking, if you used Asheville, for instance, to kind of compare between
Yeah.
size-wise at Longmont. About 15 years ago, Longmont's jobs housing ratio was somewhere in that 0.48, where meaning half the people who lived in Longmont also worked in Longmont. That's slid to about a third now, where a third of the people who live here get to also work here. And so if I'm going someplace else to work, I'm going to shop someplace else because it's closer and more convenient. And so a lot of the conversation amongst people who live in Longmont is we need better retail. And what I say is we need better jobs so that people can live and work and not go someplace else and shop.
Well, it depends. It depends on the job you're attracting. Depends on the job you're going after. In Durango, they're going to spend $4 million, and the county was going to kick in an additional $1 million to extend the infrastructure on the South Durango area to get a Target. They saw it as jobs. They saw it as leakage because they were losing people to New Mexico, that the Durango resident was going down to New Mexico to what, buy toilet paper? I don't know. But that's what they told themselves, is that we need a Target. They'd be better off investing in like a marijuana distributor than going after a Target, because they can import cash from New Mexico that way. Does that make sense? It's just, I would question the jobs thing, and New Belgium is coming to Asheville, and they asked for a subsidy. All of our local brewers who'd been there, the 19 of them, were just like, hey, we never got a subsidy. What's up with that? New Belgium backed off. Even though they're bringing 500 jobs, New Belgium backed off, and they're like, no, we're not going to ask for that kind of subsidy. We want something everybody can participate in. And yes, the local brewers are right. They didn't get anything. So, yet if you add up the jobs, well, you saw it with the bookstore versus Walmart. That little bookstore isn't at the table to argue at a Chamber of Commerce event or to talk with economic development, yet they're a much more potent producer of jobs. So, I don't think it's formulaic that way. In the case of Santa Rosa, this is, we did a percentage surface study. Santa Rosa has a very restricted boundary. They have an urban growth boundary. They also have a state mandate called SB 375, where they are forced by the state to reduce their carbon load within their boundary. So they're all trying to figure that out. This is the land area coverage where it's covered by parking lots. So over 60% of land area by parking lot, and you see this huge red ribbon going through the city. That's an incredible waste of real estate where you have all this infrastructure, yet the property owner is sitting on the majority of it as parking lot, which is very low value. So it's a subsidy already given into the system. It's not an overt subsidy, like I come down to a council meeting, I ask for a $1 million bonus on my property, and you all yell at me and call me a scumbag, and I still get it and leave, right? It's a subsidy buried into policy. So they have as much land in their city that's in parking as they do buildings. It's a waste of real estate. So a lot of that's in suburban office parks, particularly up here. So did you get a benefit out of those jobs? I may have given a bonus to have Medtronics there, but I lost so much productivity in the property tax when they did the surface parking lot there. Does that make sense? It's hard for me to answer because I don't know the actual specific case study. Sir?
Related to the previous question, I'm curious if you've done any studies on the impact of universities of higher education. CU did a study 2 years ago that they have a $5.3 billion a year economic impact in the state of Colorado, produce 17,000 jobs, 150 startups, on and on.
Yeah.
And with Fort Collins to the north, Greeley universities and Denver, really the whole of the donut of this economic catalytic activity arising out of the universities of higher education. Can you comment on that? Have you had any experience?
I've never done a study of that per se. You know, I was on the planning commission of my city, and our university, which is only 2,000 students, is on some sort of land grab where they're talking with all the adjacent property owners adjacent to the university to bequeath that real estate to them as a donation, which is good for my university. But for 2,000 students, we've got a campus that's like 2,000 acres in size. It's ridiculous. And it's taking all of our land off our tax base, and we're like, could y'all quit it, please? You know, and they just don't see it. They see them as building a land bank for their future university, but they don't need that real estate. Boston actually did a great study, and I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's called a pilot program, a payment in lieu of taxes, where Boston has 250 colleges, 250,000 students, and the Mayor Menino was like, folks, it's your college students that are having car accidents, they're getting drunk and falling in the streets, we're the ones that are picking them up, and we're taking them to our hospitals, we're paying for them, you're not paying us a red cent. And so the universities barked back, we're Harvard, we're MIT, do you know what we're doing for you? And they produced these huge economic reports. Well, that did nothing but piss off Boston. Eventually, after a decade and a half of arguing, Harvard, to its credit, stepped it up and said, you know what, we're gonna pay you some money as if we did pay taxes, because you're right, we do impact you. It's not a fair game. And so the city of Boston, and it's mostly by guilt. There's certain universities that pay. I don't think Brandeis and BU pay, but I think most of the others do. But yeah, it's called a pilot program. If you want, give me your card after and I'll pass you the document. But that could be a conversation to have. I don't know what your university impact is here, and I haven't done a study of Boulder to see what it is there either. But it's, you know, you have to open the conversation, put data out there, and have a honest intellectual debate about it.
Related to the first question, because I think it's something that a lot of people are thinking about in Boulder County, and in Longmont, some people are looking at Boulder and seeing a place that did a really good job in some ways of creating an infrastructure and planning and creating a really desirable place to live. And the only problem is a whole lot of people whose parents lived in Boulder and who grew up in Boulder can no longer afford to live in Boulder. So I'm wondering, in terms of Asheville, whether you looked at those effects at all. That when you create a great place and property values go up, it does push some people out.
Well, I think one of the things that, you know, is there a perfect solution for this? You know, we just had this conversation with Santa Rosa. That's one of the reasons why we did this map. And then we also made this map here. This is where land value exceeds building value. So you actually have more value in the dirt than whatever's built on the dirt. This is called speculation. Or this, vacant land. They have over 1,600 acres of vacant land in their downtown that's on the tax rolls that's currently not being used. So when you talk about affordability, it's really you have to start with supply and demand. Is how much supply is in the marketplace. Chances are there are a lot of developers that want to build in Boulder that want to provide that housing. But then the question to ask is, what's the cost in my time that you're going to beat me up through the process? That money doesn't disappear for me. You know, I have to pay architects, I have to pay my staff, I have to do all of that to go through your process. The longer you make me go through that, the more that you send me through that process, the more I just add it onto the back end for my housing, right? We did a parking garage in Asheville where we wrapped the whole thing with housing in a hotel, and the city was going to do the public parking garage, and we were going to wrap the whole thing. Part of the reason why we worked with the city to do that is that we wanted it to produce taxes for the community. We didn't want the city to just go off and build a parking garage, freestanding, that was essentially a net negative on the community. While we were working with the city, they said, you need to buy parking spaces. And we said, okay. If we do that, we're going to put a big reserve sign in the parking, and then we're going to take that $38,000 investment in the parking and we're going to add it to the housing cost. How about this? We're not going to reserve the parking. You're going to own it as the city. We'll let our residents, if they choose to have a car, they'll buy a pass from you, and when they leave to go out hiking or go to work, you can resell their space. And I think it's just a way to talk about it economically, but overall you need to understand part of the reason Boulder's got several issues going on, most communities, these people in particular, they have an onerous development review process, and they have a scarcity of land. So in any scarcity of a commodity, you're going to have an issue with price. You know, well, just look at Main Street here, Main Street Longmont. Like I questioned, you all have 3-story buildings. I'm just going to be a jerk for a second here. Like, imagine if I proposed a 6-story building on your Main Street. How much beef would you give me? You know? How long would that process be for me to add commodity in your marketplace? I'm just going to stick that into the cost of the units. You know, I don't have a money mill producing money. I've got to pay for my staff and my architects and my engineers, et cetera, right? So when the folks built Longmont or the original Boulder, these people didn't have a planning document 85 pages long. They didn't have a development review process. They didn't have, most towns didn't even have a city planner back then. Yet they produced an urban environment that grew incrementally. And when these folks stifled the incremental development of their town, they're actually bigger than Asheville. They don't have a building over 5 stories tall. So they're growing people, but they grew most of their people after the war. Did I get close to, no? Let me.
No, actually, I asked you a really practical question about Asheville, or that's what I was trying to get to. Whether you studied this in Asheville, whether you studied how many people were still there who had lived there before, or how many had to leave because, in general, costs went up too much.
Well, I hear that anecdotally from a lot of people. Oh, I have to move. I wouldn't be able to afford my house right now, given the price values. But again, a lot of that is it's a quotient of how many people are moving in or desire to move in, and then is my housing commodity supply keeping up with that? The other thing that I want to get to is what's going on with the land price, and is there an incentive for me to just sit here and wait, or maybe even pass it on to my grandkids and have critical real estate and hold you all hostage? Does that make sense? In Pittsburgh, and who's heard of Henry George land value taxation? In Pittsburgh, adopted Henry George tax, land value taxation, in 1970. So if you think about real estate, I've got the dirt value and I've got the improvement on the dirt, the buildings. And if I tear a building down, what have I done to my tax bill? I've dropped it to almost nothing. I can have surface parking lot and just cover my tax bill with the cars that I park there. So there's an incentive for me to just sit on that land and let you all do all of the effort around, and then eventually I'll bequeath that land onto my kids. Yet this building's paying all the taxes. Pittsburgh, what they did is they said, okay, we're just going to tax you based on location. We don't care what you put on the land. So if you knock your building down, you're still paying high taxes. So during the 1970s and 80s, Pittsburgh saw the least reduction of housing of any major American city in the United States. This tax system is really simple. And it basically is more equitable, more socially conscious to the market prices of what's going on. Because what you're doing is you're charging me my speculative waste. I mean, all around your downtown, you've got plenty of land to do development, that if it were on the marketplace, you can get 2- and 3-story buildings that would build up your supply of housing, which would drop your prices, because I can get that land faster and easier, because there's a tax penalty for someone to sit on the real estate. Y'all follow me? Elizabeth Maggie Phillips was a Georgist. Aside from having spectacular eyebrows, she realized that adults are too set in their ways and they overthink things. It's just the way things are. We have all these heuristics on what we think cities are. So she's like, I'm not even going to bother with adults. I'm going to train children on different tax systems. So she invented this board game. And you want to take a guess what that is? So she taught us all the principles of Georgia's taxation, which is location is critically important. Land assembly is number 2, and putting buildings on something is the thing you need to do to win the game. So again, when you think about the economics, there are all these false market constraints that we put on it, and there's an effect in market pricing. As far as tracking people, I can't track who leaves and who comes to Asheville. That's really kind of difficult. I pay much more attention to how much supply is in the market, and the less supply that's in the market, with the more people coming in, it's going to drive prices through the roof. Does that make sense? Or then you have to come up with some other buttress of some affordable housing trust fund or some other way to artificially band-aid an artificially constrained marketplace.
So hopefully I can articulate this. In a lot of your examples, you're talking about, well, number one, you're talking about driving people downtown, and most of the time that's the older part of town, because that's what was there first. You're also saying, you know, people like tourists don't go to places that have lost their soul. But let's say on the Front Range, I mean, you're talking about Longmont, and that's a much bigger city than where I live, and their tallest building is 3 stories. So if you're saying that we have to essentially increase density to make downtown more productive, how do we keep our soul when our historic buildings are 1-story high, maybe 2 stories?
Yeah. You know,
How do we do that without losing our entire identity and everything that's valuable to our history and tourism?
we have that in Asheville. We have that conversation. And it's one of the reasons why these slides are in here. Because I used to get folks all the time that would talk about this Asheville, our historic buildings. I mean, these are beautiful. This building here was replaced with a giant piece of junk that's like some 1970s, I mean, it wins the worst building of Asheville award every year. But why did we stop here? Why don't we tear all this back and go back to the original Asheville? This is our historic soul, right? Why are you accepting this Asheville? There was a time when we could actually tear a building down and actually replace it with something better. And I'm going to say this to the architects in the room. I blame my own profession of architecture for having a little burnout period in the 60s and 70s where we built a lot of crap. And I had a law in West Palm Beach, Florida, when I was a zoning administrator that said you must put your front door on the front of the building. And you know how many times I got in a fight with people over that? And it was just, I mean, we've just lost this ability to build urbanism. There was a time in which replacing something with something new was better. And I think that needs to be part of the conversation. It really is an aesthetic argument. What are the rules of urban design? And those need to be in there. St. Peter's Basilica. That's the 7th basilica that was built on that site. Do you think that when Michelangelo was proposing a design for the basilica, everybody was like, whoa, 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 hold on. We need to keep the old one. It's just a recent phenomena that we had to develop. We just lost the ability to create good cities. So, I think that's the thing that kind of, you should grow up. It should be at the scale of your community. You shouldn't get a 15-story building in your town if it's smaller than Longmont. That's crazy. But you could get a 3-story building or a 4-story building.
So Joe, can you speak in terms of land values? There is often a potential for conflict between urban renewal authorities that are focused on economic development and historic preservation boards that are focused on, obviously, historic preservation. Now, can you talk about compare the land values?
Yeah, it depends, and I'd have to know more about the actual locations. But David and I were talking on the way in here. We had this problem in West Palm Beach where we had 5-story zoning through the historic district, so nobody was preserving their buildings because they were all 2-story buildings. So what we did is we created a transfer development rights program that we allowed people, once they preserved their buildings, they could detach their zoning above them and sell it to somewhere else in the downtown. And the agreement was we might get a taller building in another area, but we're saving that historic building. And that worked just fine. And then we didn't lose any density in the downtown because what I needed from a city standpoint is I needed that mass of people to be in close proximity to the restaurants and everything else, jobs, so that they weren't in the transportation system, they were walking. So that was kind of one way to handle it. I would have to know more about your marketplace and what the pressures are to talk about that more articulately. Yeah, one more question, sorry.
Joe, the city had a massive flood about 2 years ago, and we're spending about $150 million to widen the river channel to allow the next flood to pass through safely. That will remove about 300 acres of riverside property out of the floodplain, open it up for development. Could you speak to what we might do with that? There's people who would like to turn it into a big 300-acre park that costs $10 million a year to maintain, or it could be something else.
I'd have to know more about the location. In Asheville, we've got this perpetual fight about this one property where they want to always turn it into a park. Now, I was on the Downtown Association board, and the thing we constantly talked about was the park that we already had that wasn't programmed. It became this nuisance. It was incredibly difficult to maintain. Yet all my neighbors we want more parks. And so I'd ask them, I'm like, have you been part of the Downtown Association? You should come down and try to help us manage this existing park we have before you ask for another one. A lot of it is just a literacy. This is a kid's book I have from the city, the town, and the country. Teacher's Guide, 1959. Kindergarten, you learn about your house. First grade, the school. Second grade, the neighborhood. Third grade, you learn about city planning. Third grade, city planning. In the Teacher's Guide, it says this: remember, too, that many children, whether urban or rural and regardless of region, are tragically limited in their knowledge of the world, and their world is largely the space in which they live and operate. People will ask for parks. It sounds great to ask for that. I want puppy dogs and clowns in my front yard. That's awesome. But you have to pay for it, right? So if you can make it work economically, if you can see the value of that park, Central Park's a great park. There's a tremendous amount of value in the real estate adjacent to it for having access to that park, and there's a tremendous amount of value going into the neighborhoods around it. So they didn't lose the value. There's actually a paper from 1913 from John Nolan where they talk about that, adding more parks into Cambridge versus Somerville in Boston. So the math is there. While patterns vary from state to state, counties are usually responsible for education, library, health, welfare, blah, blah, blah. In studying the functions performed by your county, you will no doubt find there's a duplication of services, overlapping jurisdictions, and a lack of coordination between the county and the local community. You guys have that problem? So here's the textbook. It's painfully white. It's very misogynistic. The girls are shoved out in the hallway because there's no desk space, right? But a new factory gets built. There's more families come to town. Then you ask your third graders, give 4 good reasons for building a new school. You read about Mr. Canfield. He didn't want a new school. He said our taxes are too high. We'll need more teachers and everything else. Why would some people have to pay higher taxes if a new school were built? Why are some people against paying higher taxes? The thing about the conversation, I guess what I would actually ask you in that situation to do is get together at both sides. The people advocating a park should have the patience and civic mindedness to learn about finances. And additionally, on the other side of the argument, we have to be conversant to talk normally about these things. The last thing one of the things that drives me nuts is when my peers inside the profession start talking in jargon world. Well, your FAR is a 0.3, 0.65% of your blah, 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 and this ratio of do-do-do-do. You just watch people's eyes turn off when you do that. So if you're not open with the conversation and trying to educate, people are taking their own biases into the conversation. So again, that's maybe not answering your question, but the bigger civics is what needs to be talked about with that. And maybe you can afford it, I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you all for staying. I just want to invite you out. We have some food and there's a hash bar. You can stay to continue talking out there. Thank you.